Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jai Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Janarandana. Yashodanandana Janarandana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Mr. Paramahansa Parajagacharya Ashtottara to the Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parajagacharya Ashtottara to the Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Alex, you know how to pull those curtains? Thank you, bro. Also, there's one more thing. I'm going to ask you, Vijay, if you can figure it out. Narayanam namaskritya Narang chaiva narottamam Devim saraswatim vyasam Tato jayamidiret. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, we should offer our respectful obeisances unto Lord Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, unto Narayan Rishi, the supremest human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author, and unto Srila Prabhupada, the translator, commentator, and our spiritual master. Nashta prayeshta bhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavatyuttama shloke bhakti bhavati naishtiki. By regular attendance in classes on Srimad Bhagavatam, and by rendering devotional service to the pure devotee, all that is inauspicious within the heart is destroyed almost to nil, and loving devotion to the Supreme Lord, who is glorified in the best of songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. But before we begin, one little special grammar note. When we sing the song Jai Radha Madhava, the last line goes Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Now, normally, as you would, Vijay Prabhu, as you would, we would pronounce Yamuna, Yamuna, right? Yamuna. But it's not. It's Yamuna in this case, because it's of. Just like we have Vasudev, it's the name for Krishna. That's because he's a son of Vasudeva. it becomes Vasudeva. Yeah. So next time we sing it, you can, I'll hear that from you two guys. Yamuna. Just Yamuna. Yamuna Tira. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this first day of July 2020 in SanDiego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in Canto 4, the creation of the fourth order, chapter 24, chanting the song sung by Lord Shiva, text number 66. Pramattamucchar iti kritya chintaya pravidha lobham vishayeshu lalasam Tvamapramattak sahasabi badhyase. Sorry. Let's try that one again. Tvamapramattak sahasabi padhyase. Chulle lihano ririvakum antaka. Chulle lihano ririvakum antaka. Pramattamuccha iti kritya chintaya pravidha lobham vishayeshu lalasam Tvamapramattak sahasabi padyase Chulle lihano hridivakum antakaha Pramattamuccha iti kritya chintaya pravidha lobham vishayeshu lalasam Tvamapramattak sahasabi padyase Chulle lihano hridivakum antakaha. Pramattamuccha iti kritya chintaya pravidha lobham vishayeshu lalasam Tvamapramattak sahasabi padyase Chulle lihano hridivakum antakaha. Tamuccha iti kritya chintaya lobham vishayeshu lalasam Chulle lihano hridivakum antakaha. Pramattamuccha iti kritya chintaya pravidha lobham vishayeshu lalasam Pramapramattak sahasabi padyase Chulle lihano hridivakum antakaha. Pramattamuccha iti kritya chintaya pravidha lobham vishayeshu lalasam Tvamapramattak sahasabi padyase Chulle lihano hridivakum antakaha. Pramattam, persons who are mad. Uchai, loudly. Iti, thus. Kritya, to be done. Chintaya, by such desire. Pravidha, very much advanced. Lobham, greed. Vishayeshu, in material enjoyment. Lalasam, so desiring. Tvam, your lordship. Apramattaha, completely in transcendence. Sahasa, all of a sudden. Abhipadyase, seizes them. Chut, hungry. Lelihanaha, by the greedy tongue. Ahihi, snake. Iva, like. Akum, mouse. Antakaha, destroyer. Go ahead, open the door. Translation. Lord Shiva prays to the Lord, my dear Lord, all living entities within this material world are mad after planning for things, and they are always busy with a desire to do this or that. This is due to uncontrollable greed. The greed for material enjoyment is always existing in the living entity, but your Lordship is always alert, and in due course of time you strike him, just as a snake seizes a mouse and very easily swallows him. Purport. Everyone is greedy, and everyone makes plans for material enjoyment. In his lust for material enjoyment, the living entity is described as a madman. Pramatta. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita 3.27, Prakate kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvashaha ahankara vimudhatma kartaham iti manyate. I'm going to read the actual translation. The spirit soul, bewildered by the influence of false ego, thinks himself the doer of activities that are in actuality carried out by the three modes of material nature. Mm-hmm. Wait a minute. How did that happen? Okay.
Was there a different translation in the book?
72, Macmillan translation. Everything is enacted by the laws of nature, and these laws are under the direction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The atheists or unintelligent men do not know this. They are busy making their own plans, and big nations are busy expanding their empires. And yet we know that in due course of time, many empires have come into existence and been destroyed. Many aristocratic families were created by people in their extreme madness. But we can see that in the course of time, those families and empires have all been destroyed. But still, the foolish atheists do not accept the supreme authority of the Lord. Such foolish people unnecessarily concoct their own duties without referring to the supreme authority of the Lord. The so-called political leaders are busy making plans to advance the material prosperity of their nation, but factually these political leaders only want an exalted position for themselves. Due to their greed for material position, they falsely present themselves as leaders before the people and collect their votes, although they are completely under the grip of the laws of material nature. These are some of the faults of modern civilization. Without taking to God consciousness and accepting the authority of the Lord, the living entities become ultimately confused and frustrated in their plan-making attempts. Due to their unauthorized plans for economic development, the price of commodities is rising daily all over the world, so much so that it has become difficult for the poorer classes, and they are suffering the consequences. And due to lack of Krishna consciousness, people are being fooled by so-called leaders and plan makers. Consequently, the sufferings of the people are increasing. According to the laws of nature, which are backed by the Lord, nothing can be permanent within this material world. Therefore, everyone should be allowed to take shelter of the Absolute in order to be saved. In this regard, Lord Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita 5.29, those who know this verse can chant along, Bhoktaram yagyatapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suridam sarvabhutanam gyatva mam shantamrichati. And the translation is, a person in full consciousness of me, knowing me to be the ultimate beneficiary of all sacrifices, the supreme lord of all planets and demigods, and the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities, attains peace from the pangs of material miseries. Okay, not so easy to get back to where I was. There we are. If one wants peace of mind and tranquility in society, he must accept the fact that the real enjoyer is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Lord is the proprietor of everything all over the universe, and He is the supreme friend of all living entities as well. By understanding this, people can become happy and peaceful individually and collectively. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandjana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmidatam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisances unto him and to all members of Sri Parampara. So, talk about pertinent for current events. What could be more descriptive than this? And very dramatic, this Bhagavatam. It's kind of just makes you sit up in your chair here. First of all, Lord Shiva condemns the ordinary mentality in this material world, which is that people are greedy for material things. Now, many people may think they're not really greedy, but the amount that we actually need to just live simply, you discover that if you join the brahmacharya ashram. You're living, you got a roof over your head, you got some clothes, you got the basics of food. In other words, you got your necessities, and you're going on. You can go on for years like that, as many of us have. But it's only possible when your satisfaction is coming from something other than the senses touching the sense objects. If that's your frame of reference, then immediately you become envious of those who have more of that. And there's always somebody who has more, right? Who's in a better situation. And your entire consciousness is scrambling to just increase. Now, millions and millions and millions of people in this world are just kind of trying to scratch out a living, just to get the basics of life. There are many people starving, many people don't have a roof over their head. We see them on the street here. So that's a result of various sinful activities, and so forth. But people who are living that kind of life, there's no law that they can't also chant Hare Krishna, that they can also get some kind of satisfaction in their life by chanting, even if they even have a roof over their head. I don't know if you don't go up and down this alley as much as I do. But one fellow, there was this big sofa that was thrown out. And as I'm walking up the alley coming from Mangalartik, there's one of these Mexicans driving his pickup truck, and he's already got the whole thing packed up with furniture, which looks fairly decent, And he sees this really pretty good sofa, So he stops, and I saw him checking it out, and then I saw him getting ready to try to put it on the back of his. But it was just one guy. The thing must have weighed 200-300 pounds. He couldn't do it. He left it there. So one enterprising homeless fellow said, "Well, this is impossible. Let's work it out." So he put it straight. It was on its edge. He put it straight, and then he arranged for some kind of cloth over it, and the guy's got a little home there. He's sleeping very nicely, very comfortably. Of course, the weather, helps. It's not too cold, not too hot. But the point is that when, it doesn't matter whether you're living, in a penthouse somewhere, a very expensive apartment, renting $1,000, $10,000, $20,000 a month, or paying a mortgage in New York City, or living on the street. If your framework is material, then you'll never be satisfied. Doesn't matter if you're in a very expensive home or you're just living in a little corner on the street here, because that's all you know. That's your frame of reference. You've completely forgotten the spiritual reality. So here, Lord Shiva is giving the basic principle that all living entities within this material world who are in Maya, which is the vast, vast majority, are mad after planning for things. Nunam pramata kuradevikam. This word comes in again in Mashabdev, which you'll see in the next canto. Very important instruction. Prabhupada quoted all the time. Quotes it in the purport in the Bhagavad Gita. That certainly those who are simply their measure of pleasure and it's not bad, measure of pleasure, I can use that now, is sense gratification. Literally indriya priti. He uses those words in the verse, which is translated as sense gratification. Kurade vikarma yadindriya pritiya apranoti. They're striving to satisfy their senses, high or low, even different species. They're mad because that very striving and that aspiration is sure to lead to more suffering, especially in human life when we have the opportunity to understand the science of bhakti yoga and to get out of this world, get out of birth and death. If you're simply involved, wasting human life by trying to enjoy, and what happens is that you become greedy. Even if you have enough, you want more. You want more, and more and more and more and more. Kama leads to lobha. Kama, krodha, lobha, Mada, Matsarya. These things are the enemies in the heart. So that greed is covers the consciousness even more. In other words, you're already in a state of madness, but the greed can take over, and you become inimical. You take what others have. In other words, you try to get things that way more than you need. So that you can see how that can lead to all kinds of strife within society, within families, what to speak of between nations. So here, but he says very dramatically, your lordship is always alert, right? It means apramatta. Krishna is pramatta, the fool, mad person, but Krishna is always watching. And all of a sudden, in the form of time, sudden death, he sees them just like a snake with a greedy tongue. He uses the leilihana, and just like a mouse, and you destroy them, antaka. So this is the nature, as he described before, the time factor. Time, what is that verse? I keep coming back to it. This is Sukhi Bhakta turned me on to this verse in the 11th canto. Uddhava is praying to Krishna in the middle of the Uddhava Gita. Just as Parikshit prays to Shukadev, please go on speaking and ask questions and things like that. So he's already in the middle of the Uddhava Gita, and then he says, Dashtam janam sampatitam bilesmin kalahina chuddasukoru tarsham. Chuddasukoru tarsham. Samudharayanam kripayapa vachobarasincha mahanubhava. So he describes a situation that we're all in here. And that is that we're in this deep well, which can be compared to a snake hole. And what's that snake here? The snake of time. We've heard that before, right? Kalahina. Kala can be a word for time, and ahina is a snake. So he says to Lord Krishna, I'm being bitten by this snake within the snake hole that I've fallen into, which is the material world. And that snake is the snake of time. Kala hina. And then very dramatically he says, but still, chudra sukoru tarsham. But even in spite of this desperate, doomed position, I'm very greedy, Krishna, I'm very thirsty for insignificant sense gratification. Maharaj loves to give that description, of where our position is like we're falling into a well. We just barely caught some branch. At the bottom of the well is a big lion waiting to eat us up. That's death. So we're trying to avoid that. We hold on to this little branch on the side of it. So we're holding on to the branches, or twigs, just barely. And there's a rat. There's two rats, one chewing on each side, a white and a black rat. The days of time, So we're doomed. And then there's a tiger coming up to threaten us, So if we fall down, we're hit by the lion. If we get eaten by the tiger, But there's a comb, a beehive that's dripping some drops of honey, and you just able to sneak it in there. Get some drops of honey. I say, not so bad. I can get this. In other words, in our doomed position, which who can deny it? Everybody's on death row here in this material world. It's like, we're all trying to enjoy that last supper, so we can forget the last breakfast, whatever they give them. We can forget the doomed position. That's exactly what sense gratification is. It's an intoxicant, so that at least for a little while we can forget our actual position. And this is one of the things about this pandemic, is that suddenly, you can't forget. They're trying to forget. Oh, we got it solved, right? Certain states, and then they open up and boom, more people are dying and more people we have to shut down again. So it's actually good for preaching in one sense, because you can't the usual strategies for forgetting that we're all about to die, basically, don't work anymore, because you're seeing it all around you. You're threatened, right? So this is all the more need to practice intense Krishna consciousness, right? To cope with the situation. In other words, it's an impetus for getting serious about spiritual life, for those who are already Krishna conscious, and for preaching. Says, this is the nature of the material world. These things come up. Right now as we speak, I mean, the last I heard, there's this huge swarm of locusts attacking Delhi. Delhi, India. Did you hear about it? It doesn't look like you heard about it. You seem to be surprised. Yeah, and you know, what they do is they eat all the food. They go on these, millions and billions of them. You know, if you don't, and there's no way to stop them. No, but the thing is, they're coming to the land. The reason why I mentioned Delhi is because it's a stone's throw from Vrindavan. You know, in other words, they can create havoc wherever they went. They already did it in the Middle East and Africa, North Africa. Then there's a new swarm in Argentina. Yeah, it's like this is biblical. It's going on. We got the pandemic, and we got the pests, and we got the insane leaders, and we got the bombs. You know. Time to chant Hare Krishna. There's no time. It's not optional anymore. Anyway, so he's describing this situation, and he's describing, you know, and I mean, Krishna, he's the ocean of compassion and beauty and friendship. Prabhupada quotes this verse, Bhoktaram Yakatapasam, Suridam Sarvabhut. In other words, Krishna really, God really doesn't want us to be in this situation. We've foolishly left him and forgotten it, and therefore we're experiencing it. And it can be very, very, shocking and traumatic. It is in everyone's life eventually. But sometimes it happens in such a way that you can't deny it, that everybody is experiencing it. So what is it that causes people, in spite of being in this situation, to be in denial and to try to make it work in the material world, which it never works? Prakriti kriyamanani. Ahankara vimudhatma. The false ego, which is the interface between the soul and this material world. When you read the third canto, which we've already read, and Kapila Dev's teachings, you may remember, how does this world come about? By the interaction of the false ego with various modes of nature, is producing the objects of the senses, the sensations and the senses themselves. You remember all that? And so it gradually comes down until we get everything we have here. But it starts with the false ego. In other words, we deny our real identity. And we take on this false identity, false identities of a series of bodies. Even in one lifetime, we have many different identities, right? Little baby, little toddler, first year, second year, third, going to grade school. Like you're going through, you're changing your sense of who you are and what you are and everything. And it keeps going throughout life. What to speak of birth after birth? So we've given that up, as one attempted poet said. Your servant for eternity, I've lost my true identity and fell into this horrid sea of birth and death, O Lord. O Nanda's son, please hear my plea, by your sweet grace consider me a speck of dust upon your lotus feet forevermore. This is the devotee's turning. But the other poem I have, the fall of the jiva, where Krishna lives. Felicity abounds with pure simplicity and loving sensibility. All serve him with humility. But when a living entity rejects his true identity and out of sheer stupidity surrenders to cupidity, who has a dictionary on there? Can anyone look it up? Look up cupidity. All right, we'll look it up before the end of the class. Cupidity means greed, which is what this is all about. But obviously the origin is lust. So it's a nice mixture, half and half, lust and greed. But when a living entity rejects his true identity and out of sheer stupidity surrenders to cupidity, he loses all sagacity and with it all capacity to understand reality or curb his sensuality. Abandoning humility, he touts his own ability, forgetting his fragility and fortune's volatility. Immersed in asininity for what seems an infinity of lives devoid of piety, he suffers an anxiety. And that's as far as I'll take the poem. The rest of it tells about how he can get out. But that's describing what's exactly going on here. So, Prakriti Kriyamani Gunais Karmani Sarvas. The material energy is working, right? Under Krishna's instruction. Maya Jakshena Prakritisu, he says Chadasanam in the Bhagavad Gita, 9th chapter. That this material world seems to be working on its own. Right? The scientists say, well, how does this happen? Why does this happen? And they'll give you some explanation in terms of some other material thing. Why do we develop a fever? Well, that happens when the virus gets this into. In other words, they're describing the material energy, but they don't see what's behind it. They don't see that Krishna's consciousness and his intelligence is guiding everything. That's the whole difference. That's the whole ballgame. So when a living entity is vimudha, completely bewildered by ahankar, this false identity that we have, and how we see ourselves interact with others, interact with this world, then we think, I'm the doer, I'm the controller, right? And we see this in spades. I mean, there are intelligent people in this world, and there are a lot of them, can see that we're heading off of a cliff in terms of the climate change thing. And that the cause of it is, is this building up by kartaham. I'm the doer. I can do it. I can figure out nature. We can mine this coal. We can mine this, drill this oil, build up the machine, build the computer. We can control. Now they think they can control the weather. There's a whole part of the military, it's probably mostly secret, they use the weather, create a hurricane and send it over to Russia, and they'll create, like this. And I'm sure they're trying to do the same thing with earthquakes. It's, talk about demonic. It's also mad. It's like nuclear war. Most of you are too young, even you, Vijay. But growing up in the 50s and 60s, it was like, oh my God, we've already bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We can see what it does. It's utter disaster. And then that was just atom bombs. This is hydrogen bombs, 1,000 times bigger than those atom bombs. I remember the Russians one time blew up, I think, was it a 100 megaton bomb or 50 megaton? It's all just for show. The idea is to deter the other party, even though they have atom bombs too, from trying to conquer you. Many of you don't know this, but I learned it recently, that at the end of the war, we had the atom bomb, Russia didn't have it. We had the plans all figured out. We'll bomb like 100 cities in Russia. They were going to be, our rival. We could see that. Germany was finished. It was just America and Russia. And they had it all worked out. But somebody who was a little bit sane realized, wait a minute, what about all the fallout? We're all going to mess ourselves up too, So they didn't do it, obviously. But over the course of the last, 75 years or more now, since the end of World War II? Oh, fallout? Oh, I guess, yeah, you don't know. You know what fallout is? Maybe no. No. I'm sorry. Do you don't know either? Okay. Shows that now I'm really showing my age. Fallout is when you blow up a nuclear bomb, whether it's atom bomb or hydrogen bomb, in the atmosphere, and all of this dust and all of this stuff gets thrown into the atmosphere, and eventually it comes back, but it's now all radioactive. In other words, that's what's going to happen. There's going to be all this radioactive stuff. And I remember growing up in Long Island, New York, and we heard, oh my God, because they were testing in the atmosphere during that time in New Mexico or somewhere. They thought it was, but it gets into the upper atmosphere and it comes. All the wind blows from west to east in the northern hemisphere. I don't know if you know that. And so it's we're getting this fallout coming from these explosions in New Mexico, and it's coming and it's poisoning the milk. Strontium 90 was one of the isotopes that is radioactive. Gets into the milk, gets into your bones, and this was the threat. And so therefore, eventually they had a test ban treaty. First they stopped all testing in the atmosphere, then they'd blow them up under the ground. You can imagine what, Bhumi's reacting to that. Blow up the bombs. And eventually they even had a test ban. Then they don't even test underground anymore. But of course our glorious leader, wants to get rid of that treaty so we can test again. The guy's a total moron, It's not my verdict. His own Secretary of State said it. So it's a perfect example. Here of what we're reading in this verse, the unlimited greed, of the United States of America. We won the hot war in the World War II, and then eventually the Soviet Union collapsed. So we won the Cold War. Now we sit astride the planet, and now we're going to, exploit this, exploit that, And we don't even care about our own workers. We're going to take all the work. You know, they have these unions, you know, and then they get $25 an hour to build cars, you know. We can build them in Vietnam or China for $5 an hour, guys. All right, let's take all of the factories and open them up in China. In other words, they don't think, well, what's going to happen to the guys in America? They become homeless. They become, you know, they're all gun owners. And you know. In other words, the greed destroys your intelligence. The lust does the same thing, covers. And so you end up with what we have here. Even the whole pandemic, all this air travel and stuff, you know, and anyway. It's Shivaram Swami giving these little 5-minute instructions. Have you seen them? He has these things that he's producing. And one of them was how the pandemic was caused by this massive meat eating. You know, and in a sense you can trace it to that. Because of, you know, these what they call wet markets, where they have, you know, animals, wild animals in China, where they come and they slaughter them in front of you, you know. But that's the way that the bats, they bite the animals, somebody eats the animal and it crosses over, it becomes a human virus. Yeah, this is what happened. That's one of the theories. So then, okay, so it's in China, but now you have all this world travel, people flying all over from, you know, you fly from Wuhan to LA. Boom. One person may carry it and off and running. The whole spreads all over the world. So, clearly, if our whole activities are guided by greed and lust, there's going to be hell on earth, the hellish planet. It's described in the Bhagavatam, in the 12th canto. And so, what's the solution to this problem? This is what the revolution of Krishna consciousness does. It gives us knowledge as to what's going on. And the so-called political leaders are busy making plans to advance the material prosperity of their nation, but factually these political leaders only want an exalted position for themselves. Hello, right out of the headlines, right? Nobody trusts these guys anymore. So the corruption is everywhere. Due to their greed for material position, they falsely present themselves as leaders before the people and collect their votes, although they're completely under the grip of the laws of nature. Prabhupada's books are just, we could take this, we can make a pamphlet out of this purport, and people would say, yeah, it sounds like exactly what was going on. So what's the solution? Prabhupada gives this peace formula here. Bhoktanam yagata pasam. First of all, recognizing the existence of God, of the soul, as Krishna gives in the Bhagavad Gita, and that there's a supreme soul, there's a controller, there's an intelligence behind everything. And unless we dovetail our activities to the will of the Supreme and the desire, we're going to be suffering in this world. And that's what this verse in the end of 5th chapter is. Bhoktaram yagita pasam. Now, who's performing sacrifices or austerities? All kinds of people. And people, of course, now everything's disrupted, but those who still have jobs, getting up they get up at 3:30, but they don't come to Mangalarti. They take their breakfast, they get on the road at 4 o'clock, and they get on their commute, an hour and a half, 2 hours, 3 hours to go to work, whatever it is, and working like dogs, and and they come back with another big commute. So the jug is in the tapasa, the sacrifices and austerities are performed by devotees, as well as by regular people. But to understand that Krishna is the enjoyer, he should be the object of that, not that you can get a little money and support yourself and forget all about God. So understanding that he's the enjoyer of the sacrifices and the austerities, that he's the Lord, the Ishvara of all the planets, and that he's the friend of all living beings, one can attain a real peace. This idea that Krishna is the friend, I brought this up once before. One of the things that Prabhupada mentions in the introduction to the Gita, he talks about the super soul and how he's aware of everything that's going on, everything we're doing, everything we're thinking. And then he says, one should not forget this. One should remember this. So why do people forget it? Because it's just like a burglar. Badri Maharaj mentioned, you want to deny or hope that you won't be caught and seen. You don't want to be seen by the authority who can cause you problems. So, but when you're actually trying to connect with God and trying to serve Him, then that guidance that you get from within is very helpful. Then you can really see Him as the best friend. He's guiding you in your individual life, and He's providing you with the knowledge from externally. Through Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada said, Bhagavad Gita is simply the super soul outside, so we can perceive it. Otherwise, we're too covered, we can't really get instruction from within. But still, to understand that. So understanding that Krishna's the real enjoyer, He's the controller, and He's the friend of all, one can attain peace. And and pointing out again, there has to be something that supplants the sense gratification. Because we are enjoying beings, we're part and parcel of Krishna. He's Anandamaya Vyasat. He's the supreme enjoyer, Purushottam. So we're little Angsha, chip off the old block, we used to say. And therefore we have His qualities. But since we've rejected spiritual happiness, our only alternative is this flickering, this material happiness, which just entangles us more and more in the banyan tree of this material world, as we've been reading in the 15th chapter. We just finished the 15th chapter. So, this is Lord Chaitanya's great gift. Lord Krishna, in the form of Lord Chaitanya, came, and the process for this age, chanting and dancing, and chanting Hare Krishna, one can immediately, from any platform, no matter how sinful you are, get a taste, get some purification, and enjoy, to a little bit at least, this transcendental happiness. So at least you then have a different perspective. In other words, you're not at the bar, you're not trying to seduce some woman, you're not doing all of the things that people are, intoxication, all of these horrible things. You're just chanting Hare Krishna. So if you're intelligent and you want to investigate the process further, you have a chance of transferring your enjoying capacity to spiritual enjoyment. The chanting, the dancing, the serving, the seeing the devotees, everything that involves Krishna consciousness, that produces nectar, that we call nectar. Hearing about Krishna. When you're actually devoted to Krishna and you're trying to center your life on Krishna, then the Krishna book becomes a different experience. It's already interesting, but the fact that this is your dear beloved Lord who's doing all these things, then you can take great pleasure in that. That's what the book begins with. It's important to read that introduction. Prabhupada quotes, I think, basically one verse in the whole Krishna book. In other words, it's a Sanskrit verse. Anyone remember what it is? Vijay, you know this verse. Nivrittatarsha ubhagiyamanan babaushadatrota manobiraman kottama shloka gunanavaran puman varajeta vinapashugnat. It's on your list, Uttama shlokas. So, what he's saying there, now he's gone through 9 cantos. Now just try to step back a minute and see the scene. He's been going maybe 5 days now. No eating, no sleeping, no drinking water, no doing anything but hearing this Bhagavatam. And he's not like says, okay, let's take a break. Let me take a nap, take a drink. No. He says, go on. Now I want to hear the actual 10th canto, the pastimes of Krishna. So the verse says, Nivrittatarsha ubhagiyamanan bhavaushada trota manobiraman ka uttama shloka guna anuvadat. Uttama shloka guna anuvadat. Uttama shloka means he who is glorified, Krishna is glorified in the most beautiful poetry. Guna anuvadat, words that describe his qualities, pastimes, and so forth, is just especially when uttered and sounded by those who are free from all material desires. Nivritta tarsha. Tarsha means thirst or desire. So the pure devotees, when they speak and they glorify Krishna, it's pure nectar. But for those who are, receptive to it. So, and not only is it nectar, but it also cures the disease of birth and death. Bhava aushadhi. Aushadhi is an herbal remedy. The nectar is an herbal remedy. For bhava. Bhava means the world of change. Birth, death, old age. And it's sweet. Shrota mano abhiramat. It gives pleasure to the ears, to the heart, like that. So who would not listen? Who would give up listening? Ka uttama shloka gunanavadat puman varajeta. Who is that person who would Virajeta means stop, but instead of Pashugna? Pashugna is one who is a meat eater, gross meat eater, or one a killer of the soul, right? An impersonalist, or someone who denies the existence of God or that Krishna is God. So, in other words, those who are fortunate enough to come to the point of believing in Krishna as God, and who are willing to pursue that knowledge for their ultimate benefit, then they can get a real taste for hearing. And if you develop that taste, you're on your way back to Godhead. Nectar of instruction. It may not be sweet as nectar at first, because your mind is full of so many dirty things. It says Arjuna had so many dirty things in his ear. The trash in his ear was cleared out by hearing Bhagavad Gita. So, what is that? Syat Krishna Nama Charitadi Sitapya Vidya Pittopatapta Rasanasena Rochikanu Kintvadarat Anudinang Kalusaiva Justa Svadvi Kraman Bhavati Tadnkalamula Hantri. It's a very important verse. So he's describing the process of devotional service, what the do's and the don'ts. The whole thing, achahara priyasascha. First come the don'ts, because if you don't stop all the nonsense, you can't begin. And then cultivating enthusiasm, patience, determination, giving up bad association, following in the footsteps of the great devotees, so forth. And then how to relate to other devotees, very important. Otherwise, you're very likely to offend them and chop away at your creeper, So the Vaishnava etiquette is so important. How to exchange loving relationships, how to regard different levels of devotees. And then, after choosing a bona fide guru at the beginning, first verse is about that. So then he says, okay, now here's the practice, basically hearing and chanting. And at the beginning, it may not be as sweet as nectar. It may be bitter. It will be bitter because we're suffering from the hepatitis of ignorance, and therefore sugar tastes bitter. I experienced that. I was in the hospital for a month in '69. And so, Syat Krishna Nama Charitari, etc., the holy name, form, pastimes of Krishna. Sita, very tasty. Although that's true, avidya pittoptadas, because of our ignorance, pittopatapya, it's like the bile covering your tongue in the jaundice, and everything tastes bitter, even the sweetness. But isn't it wonderful? Kintvadanat anudinang. Every day, if you follow the practice of this, chanting it anyway and hearing anyway, there's austerity. Anudinang kalusaiva justa svadvi kramad. The very thing that tasted bitter tastes sweet to you now. And there's no limits to that sweetness. What's the verse? Those who know can chant it. Tunde tanda manirating. No? Tunde tanda. That's my old habit of memorizing nectar verses. Tunde tanda vanirating batunade tundavali labdaye. Karna kroda kadhammani gatayate karna bodebhyaks biham. Chetak prangana sangini vijayate savindriyanam kritim norjane chanitaki yadvidamitai krishneti vanadvahi. Rupa Goswami in his Vidagdha Madhava, he writes this verse. Lord Chaitanya heard it, went into ecstasy, Haridas Thakur. I do not know how much nectar these two syllables Krishna have produced. When I chant them, they seem to dance within my mouth, and I want to have millions of mouths. When they enter the ear holes, they seem to sprout, and they want to have millions of ears. And when they enter the courtyard of the heart, all the senses become inert, the mind becomes fixed on Krishna. So that's the cure for the greed, for the madness, for all of the problems of the world, and for our own problems within this world, fighting against birth, old age, disease, and death. The holy name and everything that follows from chanting the holy name. Any questions, comments? I'll read the verse again. Maybe I'll give you some ideas. My dear Lord, all living entities within this material world are mad after planning for things, and they are always busy with the desire to do this or that. This is due to uncontrollable greed. The greed for material enjoyment is always existing in the living entity, but your Lordship is always alert, and in due course of time you strike him just as a snake seizes a mouse and very easily swallows him. Dramatic. Okay, all glory to Srila Prabhupada. Haribol.